The most interesting characters in Seinen manga are rarely the ones people think they understand. They get labeled villain, weakling, rival, tragic hero, and once the label sticks, people stop looking. But Seinen doesn't write characters that fit neatly into labels. It writes people, complicated, contradictory, shaped by circumstances they didn't choose. People who only make sense when you take the time to look past the obvious read. These are 5 characters that almost everyone gets wrong. And what you find underneath the misunderstanding is always more interesting than the surface. Askeladd is the easiest character in Vinland Saga to hate. He kills Thors. He manipulates everyone around him. He is brutal, calculating, completely unsentimental about using people for whatever he needs. If you came to Vinland Saga expecting a clean moral landscape, he is the obvious villain, the obstacle, the man Thorfinn is right to want dead. But that reading falls apart the moment you understand him. Askeladd is not an idealist. He never pretended to be. He is a cynic who sees the world exactly as it is. The politics, the violence, the machinery of power that moves through people without apology. And he operates inside it with complete clarity. He has no illusions about himself or anyone else. And that honesty, as brutal as it makes him, is not villainy. It is something closer to tragic clarity. And here is what most people miss entirely, in the most broken, complicated way imaginable. Askeladd was a father to Thorfinn, the man who murdered his father, raised him, kept him alive, tested him, shaped him more than anyone else in his life. Neither of them would have admitted it, but it was true. Askeladd doesn't die as a villain. He dies as a man who saw every option available to him, chose the most hopeful one, and carried that choice alone until the end. That is not a villain. That is one of the most complete human beings in all of Seinen. Thors dies early, and because he dies early, most people remember him as a type instead of a person. The strong, peaceful father, the warrior who gave it all up, a symbol more than a character. But that reading is incomplete. Thors was not naive. He was precise. When everything closed around him, the politics, the obligation, the violence he could see coming, he understood it completely. And he chose to die, not because he gave up, but because it was the best possible outcome he could create inside an impossible situation. His survival would have cost more than his death. He knew that. He chose accordingly. And what makes him extraordinary is not just that choice, but what the story does with him. It shows us the finished version first, the man who already understands, who has no enemies, who knows what strength actually is. And then it removes him and spends the entire story walking Thorfinn back to that same understanding. Thors is not just a character. He is the answer, given at the beginning, before we know how to understand it. Most people read Sasaki Kojiro as the final boss, the last opponent, the strongest enemy Musashi must overcome. But that misses what makes him so important. Kojiro never wanted to be anyone's rival. He doesn't fight for titles or reputation or to prove anything. He fights the way a child plays, with joy, with presence, with no weight attached to the outcome. For him, swordplay is communication. It is how someone who cannot hear and cannot speak reaches out and connects. He has already arrived at something Musashi is still searching for, not through struggle, but because he never left it. Kojiro is not the obstacle. He is the reflection, the living image of everything Musashi is trying to become, walking around without even realizing it. And the tragedy is that the only way they can meet is through conflict. Matahachi is one of the most hated characters in Vagabond, and I think people hate him for the wrong reason. They say it's because he's weak, because he takes the easy road, because he lies and never seems to grow. But that's not why he's uncomfortable. He's uncomfortable because he's familiar. Matahachi and Musashi started in the same place, the same moment, the same road. Everything that separates them was built one choice at a time, and a moment that split their paths wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. A woman mistook him for Musashi, looked at him with admiration he hadn't earned, and he didn't correct her, not because he planned it, but because it felt better. That is the first lie, and everything grows from it. What makes him tragic is that he knows. He has moments of clarity where the truth is right in front of him, and every time, instead of facing it, he reaches for something easier. Another story, another excuse, another version of I could if I wanted to. You don't hate Matahachi because he's a villain. You hate him because somewhere in his choices, you recognize yourself. Kaneki is easy to misread because his story is overwhelming. The trauma, the transformation, the constant breaking and rebuilding. It looks like tragedy, but that misses what makes him so powerful. Kaneki might be one of the most psychologically complex characters in all of Seinen. Everything that happens to him forces a single question, over and over again. Who are you? When everything that defines you is taken away. His transformations are not random, they are responses. Each one is someone trying to survive in a situation they were never built for. He is not unstable. He is someone trying to hold together a self that was already fragile before everything started breaking. His mind becomes the most dangerous place he inhabits, not because he is weak, but because he is too aware, too honest about what is happening to him, to hide behind illusions. People see someone who keeps breaking. What they are actually watching is someone who keeps trying to rebuild from less and less without ever giving up completely. That is not tragedy. That is something deeply human. These 5 characters share one thing. They were all reduced to labels before anyone took the time to understand them. And that is exactly what Seinen refuses to let you do, if you're paying attention. It builds characters that are too complex for labels, too human for simple explanations, too honest about how people actually work. The villain who was a father, the dead man who was the answer, the rival who was a reflection, the coward who was a mirror, the tragedy who was something more. Seinen doesn't write types, it writes people. And the ones that make you the most uncomfortable are usually the ones worth looking at the longest.